fixing your hair.
Does it look okay?
Is it all good?
Is it good?
Beautiful. Of course your hair looks good.
Oh, that's nice.
I'm a nice guy.
You are.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Odum and Andrea podcast. My name is Odum, and I'm here with my lovely wife, Andrea. And together, we talk about people that do some really cool stuff, have some amazing adventures, and that inspire us to, want to try our own little adventures. And today, I think, I'm really excited about this one because I know you are excited about this because you've been waiting for a long time to talk about this person, and this is somebody that we've read before.
Yes.
You've read with the kids, and it's really definitely up my alley. I don't know if it's so much up your alley, but we'll see what happens after we read this. So I'm talking about Adam Shoalts.
Yes.
And he's a Canadian, correct? Do you know where he was born? He's somewhere in Ontario?
He's born in Fenwick, Ontario.
Fenwick, Ontario.
So which is like Niagara area.
Niagara area. Yeah. And this book we're reading today of his is called Alone Against the North, an expedition into the unknown. And of course, this really speaks to me, I guess you can say, because, in 2018, we decided to do our own little expedition where we were going to go all across of Canada and the United States.
Yeah.
But things ended up not working out so well. You can always check out our YouTube channel to see how
that crashed and burned.
Yeah. But either way, we tried, and it was still a whole lot of fun. And
absolutely.
If at first you don't succeed,
try again.
Try again.
Absolutely.
So with that being said, let's just get into this because I'm excited because I haven't read this one.
No.
The one we did read together with the kids, and it was actually an audiobook.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the title was.
Beyond the Trees.
Beyond the Trees.
Yes.
And that was him going kind of up against like going up the Mackenzie River, I think it was. Was it the Mackenzie River?
Part of it was the Mackenzie River.
Yeah.
Yes. So he basically, in that book, journeys right across the Arctic, the Canadian Arctic. And that was like 4,000 kilometers on his own. The Arctic.
Then it's just like the bugs and the musk ox and all the crazy. I mean, just to be alone. And this is also, it's not like going camping in Algonquin Park where the trails are really well defined. This is like
there is no trails.
Yeah. Or wasn't there maybe some older paths or what, but not like here's it's
but he's also just like on like the waterways, so in a way like that is the path.
Right, exactly.
Forward,
exactly. And he obviously has tremendous skills because he's been doing this for forever. This wasn't his first thing. Yeah. Anyways, enough about that book because we're here to talk about Alone Against the North.
Yes.
So with that, take it away.
So Adam Shoalts is known as Canada's Indiana Jones.
Awesome.
So
love it already.
Yeah. So like we were saying, he was born in Fenwick and he spent like his whole entire life just in the outdoors. He has a fraternal twin brother, and his dad, they would just...
Sorry, what's fraternal?
Fraternal, not identical.
Right. So you're born at the same time or whatever.
Yeah, just not identical. Yeah.
Right. Because that's like two different eggs being fertilized by two different sperm?
I think so.
Yeah. Anyways, just to get technical, because it obviously is important for this discussion.
Not at all.
Yeah, I know.
All right. So they were always outdoors. Their dad taught them how to fish and trap and just how to love the woods. And so he loved them so much. He was like, he also loved like looking at maps, and it's funny because he liked looking not just like at, like the road map, but like this kind of like
the
satellite view.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And the topographic and stuff. And it's funny because Tristan, whenever we look up something, he always makes me go satellite view to see all the wilderness and stuff.
Yeah,
so that was
the
funny.
Terrain. Yep.
Yeah. And to the point where, so I have this one, this is one of the books of his that we own. It's a history of Canada in 10 maps. So you can tell, like, obviously he loves maps.
Yeah.
So,
best-selling author of Alone Against the North. I guess you wrote this one after, obviously.
Yeah. So he was like, how do I take this and make it into a job, basically? So
like traveling around or exploring or whatever.
Exploring and all of that stuff. Unfortunately, he was told, well, you're born in the wrong century if you want to be an explorer, because it's already explored. Everything's explored.
Yeah. It reminds me of the Jim Carrey movie. What's it called?
Truman Show.
The Truman Show. Yeah. He's like, I want to be an explorer. It's like, it's already been all explored.
Yeah.
Just try to discourage him from leaving.
Yeah. But what's really interesting is he goes through how vast and how big Canada is and our population density. And so if you look at our population density now and like even before Europeans came, it's almost like implausible to think that the whole of Canada, especially the north, has been completely explored, and it's almost impossible to think that human footprints have touched every single place.
Mm-hmm.
Like there has to be places here that have not been explored because they're so remote or so vast.
Right.
Because even the Aboriginal, the native people that lived here before Europeans, there's places that even they wouldn't have been able to go because there's just not enough people to get that far to these different places. So I thought that was really, really interesting. And so Canada's north, just to give you an idea of like scale of how big it is, there's more than 5,000 kilometers from Alaska in the west all the way to Labrador in the east. So that's how vast our country is. And the population density here is less than 0.09 people per square kilometer. Yeah. And then to compare that, when we talked about Mongolia with Ash Dykes, one of the reasons he wanted to go there was because, again, it's the same idea. It's a huge area, but population is like, density is really low. So the population density of Mongolia is 1.76.
So it's like 2 or 3 orders of magnitude. Yes. Can't remember exactly. Well, you said 0.09 to
0.09
to 1 point.
To 1.76.
Yeah, it's 2 orders of magnitude.
Yeah. And so to compare that to a hugely populated like country like India, their population density is 390 people
it's
per square
insane.
kilometer.
Yeah, so, and the thing too with Canada is that I don't know exactly the number here, so I'm just going to speak kind of out of my ass here, but it's something maybe in between 60 to 80% of all people live along kind of the border between Canada and the United States. I don't know exactly what the percentage is, but it's a lot, just more around the southern areas of of the country.
And even for the indigenous people, it was, it's the same thing. They were only in really 2 to 3 small areas. So the rainforests in British Columbia and then southern Ontario because of just...
Well, Southern Ontario has such fertile lands.
Yes.
The Great Lakes are there, and close from the Great Lakes, you can get all the way up to the ocean.
Exactly.
So that's the nature of kind of exploration, where life kind of goes in from the water, and then you kind of spread outwards, right? Like think of the Mesopotamian times and the early humans, and that's kind of how the early civilizations were. It's always around rivers and water, because it's like the foundation of life.
Many things, yeah.
Yep.
And so in 1916, the Geologic Survey of Canada estimated that the country still contained over 900,000 square miles of unexplored territory. Yeah. And it wasn't until 2012 that the kind of final topographic map of Canada was finished. Just to give you an idea of just like how unexplored this country actually really, really is. But he does say like a lot of the
but that's that topographic map, that's probably stuff done by satellites as opposed to actually people going there.
Exactly. And that's the point he's making, is some of these places are not accurately mapped, and we'll get into what happens in this story. But he says there's so many lakes in Canada that no geographer has like been able to count them all, and so they estimate that there's like 3 million. That's like our best estimate, that there's like 3 million
I just want to have one house and cabin on a lake, so let's just get one of those 3 million. And this is all like crown land, I would imagine, mostly. Like, is it owned by the people?
I don't know. I don't really know. It's a good question, but I don't know.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough.
So the area that we're going to be talking about today that he's going to be exploring is called the Hudson Bay Lowlands. And so we have obviously Big Hudson Bay, and then James Bay kind of comes down. So the Hudson Bay Lowlands are kind of like right around there. Okay.
Like in between Hudson's Bay and James Bay.
Yeah, that kind of whole area. And so
on the west side or on the east side?
On the west side of James Bay, and in Ontario, because on the east side of James Bay, it's Quebec. Yeah. So we're talking Ontario. Okay. And so it stretches.
Like Churchill is kind of around that area.
That's Manitoba.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure.
What's the one? There's one in Ontario, Northern Ontario, one city that's kind of close there.
Cochrane?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I can look it up on the map.
I'm not sure. Yeah, anyways.
But anyways, so it stretches for almost 400,000 square kilometers. And so, but basically it's like the native people, they used to call it like I forgot the quote's in here somewhere, but it's like sterile, because it's just like muskeg, which is like northern quicksand, because it's just this moss, and it's just like you just sink in it.
You don't really want to walk in there.
Yeah, but because like you have like sometimes permafrost, the water can't drain into the soil,
Right.
so you just have this like whatever, and there's like stunted forest, and
It's probably pretty dangerous then, I would imagine.
Yep, and yeah, so like the soils,
well, for rookies anyways.
Yeah, and so like the soils obviously are really poor and really acidic, but it is North America's largest wetland. It's so vast. And so there was like a lot of fur trading posts on like the major rivers that drain into Hudson's Bay and James Bay. But for the most part, like it's just not very well explored at all. So, so his whole deal was, he was kind of like, I'm not sure, he did like a master's degree, and I think he went to the Hamilton University, I forget it now, McMaster, yeah. So I think he did some work in McMaster, and so he was just kind of looking at maps, trying to plan like his next adventure, and he wanted to find a river that had like no evidence of humans having been there before, and definitely no documentation of anyone having been there before.
Yeah, and within Canada, obviously. He's sticking to Canada. Okay.
Yeah. And so he says, people don't make a name for themselves by following in the footsteps of others, and the easy path is generally not the most interesting.
Yep.
So that's really cool. So what he does find is he finds this river that kind of parallels the Ontario-Quebec border, and it does have a name. It's called the Again River, and he can't find any documentation of anybody having been there other than the surveyors that would have had to cross it at one point for the border.
For the line, yeah.
So, but only at that one point, not the whole thing.
Right. So it's like when he's saying he's doing like research and he's trying to find out these things, he's just going to different libraries, I guess, and just looking at the old maps and archives, and then
like he had to dig deep for a lot of the information he was looking for. And so just to give you an idea, so the Again River, it drains into what's called I'm not going to say it right, the Harricana River, which was a minor fur trade river. And then that river then drains into James Bay.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we are on the map in a way. So he wanted to be the first, write the first detailed exploration and substantial published account of the Again River in history. And so looking at the maps, it looked like it was just over like 100 kilometers long.
The river.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so...
Do you know what stage of river it is? Or in other words, do you know how wide it is and how...
Yeah, so we'll get into that one. Yeah, for sure. And so, yeah, so him and his dad end up going together in 2008. And so they go to Cochrane, and then they get someone to drive them to kind of this one creek that they're able to then canoe down this creek, and then hopefully eventually find the headwaters of the Again, and then go down. So
go down the river.
Go down the river. Yeah.
But it's like up in the map towards.
Yeah. And this is what's always weird to me, because I'm like, oh, rivers drain down. Well,
it's not down on a map.
No, it's down. Yeah. So that one always kind of messes with me. So that was in 2008. They go and like his dad's just like, no, I'm done. Like kind of like after like a week or 10 days, his dad's like, no, we're not. They get to this like one really marshy area where he thinks there's the headwaters of this river are somewhere, but his dad's kind of like done, because it's just like, it's awful. It's just like so marshy, and there's like almost impassable.
Right. So and it's just like the bugs, I'm sure, are just eating them alive.
I can't, even when he's talking about the bugs, it's just like, I can't. Ugh, it's awful. Yeah. Just awful.
It's like, I don't think even if you were made out of pure DEET, you'd still be, I don't think you'd still be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that's crazy.
So then the next year, him and his friend Wesley, who he's done so many different trips with, they go and they attempt the same thing.
Just try to find
the headwaters again the neest year. But it's funny because he's really, I'm not going to be able to find it in here. He's really funny because his, just his attitude about things, like, cause his friend was just like, well, I only have like this amount of time because I need to be back for my sister's wedding. Right. And so he's just like, well, I'm sure they would understand. You're like exploring, like when they understand if you're like late by like a little bit, and it's like, I just didn't understand this.
You're late by a little bit. It's not like you're gonna roll in late. It's like, oh, 4 weeks late to the wedding.
Yeah, so it was just really really funny, and just like how he talks about it, he has a really good sense of humor.
Yeah.
And so this time they get a little bit further, but they just don't have enough time, and they have to turn around and come back.
Do they still find the headwaters?
No, still they don't go too much further than him and his dad do at that point.
Okay.
So then that winter, he ends up working for Canadian Geographic, writing articles, and he kind of almost like, kind of puts that river out of his mind. He's like, oh, he attempted it twice. It's just kind of not happening. And he goes, but that winter he does some research and he goes to the Everglades. And Wes was actually supposed to go with him. And he's like, oh, well, he had to work and he has his girlfriend now. And blah. And he's like, oh, it's like he's getting domesticated, like perish the thought kind of thing. So it was just kind of funny how he talked about it. But then he also goes to the Amazon that winter as well. And what's really crazy is, I guess, like he must have, well, he even says like his memory is like really, really good. And so I guess when he got there, they kind of gave him a test about like all these different like insect species and plant species about like what each one was. Mm-hmm. And he was
like the ones to watch out for and that are dangerous or whatever.
Or what they were looking for maybe on this expedition. And like he got it perfect. Mm-hmm. He knew what everything was. Yeah. So.
Well, I guess if you're around that kind of stuff all the time, it just becomes second nature.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, but this is Amazon, so it's like different than Canadian stuff.
Well, no, I understand.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So he's kind of working for Canadian Geographic for a while, and he just like has, he sees like all the memorabilia there from like other explorers that have come before him. And he talks a lot about all the different explorers, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. That's definitely worth a read. So then he submits a proposal to explore another nameless river on the Hudson Bay Lowlands.
He receives a what? Sorry?
He submits a proposal.
Okay.
For them to give him a grant.
To the Canadian Geographic Survey or
Society or whatever. Yeah, to explore a different, not the Again River, but another river in the Hudson Bay Lowlands that, again, didn't have any published record of being explored. And they had never sponsored an expedition into the lowlands before, so he was given the grant. And so he actually proposed, there was 2 different rivers he was kind of looking at that he could do. So he's trying to find someone to go with him. He cannot find anyone to go with him except his one buddy that was really good at athletics, but a crazy slacker. And so this guy, he's in his 20s, he's living in the basement of his parents' house. Sure. He's just lazy, just kind of,
lazy but athletic.
Yeah, like it's like just one of those people that's just really good at like, but just doesn't put much into it.
Sure.
Like,
yeah.
So so Adam's talking about him and describing this guy, and he's like losing everything. Like he loses his wallet, he forgets things everywhere.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
Is it me?
I know. No, but like this is like a next level though. Like next level kind of thing. So mostly it's Adam that is prepping for this trip. And so because they're going into polar bear territory, apparently it's required by the government or something.
Well, because it's funded by the whatever. That's what they need to. Because if you're going by yourself, you don't have to. But
but they're like,
for them,
you have to take a gun.
Yeah.
You have to have at least like a .22 caliber.
Yeah, they don't want someone that they sent out there on their dime
getting killed by a polar bear. So he has to get a gun plus then a bunch of different ammo for that. The guy's like, oh, well, here, I'm going to give you this. And well, you probably want this one too. And you probably want this one too for like polar bears, right? Depending on like where.
Well, doesn't
how far you
a gun have the same type of ammo?
Well, I think like you got him like
different shell types, I guess. I don't know.
Bird shot or something like that too.
I don't know. Yeah, I guess maybe if it's like a shotgun, it has different.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just want one that's got a good spread.
You got a good spread.
Got a good spread. Ain't got no problem over here anymore.
Yeah. So they end up driving to Hearst, and then they take a plane to this lake where they're kind of going to start. And apparently there was like kind of a camp set up on this lake as well, even though it's like crazy remote. What's interesting is
if you can plane in, get some supplies there.
What's kind of interesting is that I have family history in Hearst, so that's where my mom's parents lived for a really long time, and I think and then my grandmother's family, they lived in Hearst for a really, really long time because they're Finn. And so Finns
came from Finland.
And of course they go where it's freezing cold because why not?
Why not?
So, yeah. And what's interesting too is so they take the plane to this lake, and he talks about this mining, like open pit mine on this one of the main kind of rivers in the lowlands. And he talks about that mine, and then there's another mine that's actually really close to the headwaters of the Again River as well. And so he talks about those mines and just like how there's such like a blemish, and they really are. If you look at a map and you see them, like they look awful. Like they have this beautiful wilderness, and then these like open pit mines.
Yeah, well, I mean,
so
that is one. I mean, the one thing about Canada is that there's. One thing I was thinking too is there's got to be tons of resources there. Like, is this gold or diamonds or what?
Well, this one is a De Beers mining site, so it's diamonds.
Yeah.
So, so they land in Holly Lake, and immediately Brent starts complaining. It's cold. There's bugs. Their canoe's really small. This like really tiny 13-foot canoe.
Why would they get a 13-foot canoe with two guys for so long?
He can't afford it. Even though they're funded, there's still like, there's a lot of stuff they just don't have. And so he decides to get this used 13-foot canoe.
Oh my God.
And it's like really super shallow. It only weighed 52 pounds.
So it's a good canoe, but
yeah,
because I mean, the lighter is usually but the better.
But it's not like Kevlar or anything like that. Like so, and then at one point, like they're trying to get paddle. And so Adam has to like jump into the canoe because how it's like it's so windy and the waves are so crazy. So they have to get in. So he has to just jump in, and he lands on his thumb, and it's like bleeding and awful and gross and everything. And he's like, for the rest of the trip, he's like in intense pain because
this is Adam's thumb.
Adam's thumb. Yeah. So, and then Adam has to teach Brent how to do like everything. Like, so from like,
they're not prepared for this at all.
No, not at all. So he has to show him how to like load and fire the shotgun. He has to show him how to purify water. The guy doesn't even know how to make a fire. Like,
well, like what way? Just like with a lighter?
Well, I guess so. Adam goes down to like their first night of camping. Adam goes down to purify water, and he's like, okay, well, like he kind of gets the logs and stuff, and kind of sets up the fire. And he's like, okay, Brent, can you like get this going while I go purify water? He comes back and
trying to light the big log on fire.
No, he's like just like sitting, head down, and he's like, Adam comes back. I was like, what the fuck? What's there no fire? Yeah. He's like, it won't light. And so Adam's just like really quick. We're good. Like,
well, you got to start with the dry leaves or something like that.
Of course,
and
like
you got to start small or whatever, build it up.
But like even the kids know how to start a fire. Like,
well, I guess
it's not hard.
Well, the thing is you learn too, because when we went on our trip too, right? It's like you start the fire and they see what we're doing and whatever, and you just learn by, So if you don't have someone, anyways, that's weird.
Yeah. So
it doesn't make any sense to me that you're going on this long trip, way up north.
I know.
And like this guy doesn't even know anything. Like that's weird. And like you don't know how to use a shotgun. Like, did you not take lessons? Like they don't
I would going into polar bear territory.
Like you need to have a license in order to get a gun, and then you have to like pass some tests. I guess you don't. They don't take you shooting. I think you just have to write a written test. So maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
So I don't know. So anyways.
Weird.
So he has a couple.
I want to know how to use it.
Yeah. So he has a couple different like routes he has planned out. And so the first route is they go down these lakes, and then they're going to portage across the forest to try and get to the headwaters of this like unknown lake. And so
I just think of portage and like when you're going, even down this route, it's still a pain in the ass. I can't imagine portaging and not even knowing where you're going. No set defined path. You're walking through sticks and woods and whatever. I mean, I guess the only good thing,
dense forest. Well, like it's like untouched dense forest.
Well, I was going to say though, the one good thing that might be good in the north is that the further north you go, the less forest and tree cover there's going to be. So maybe there's smaller trees and maybe it's more open. They're not
where they are.
They're not tundra. level
not
north
yet,
yet.
not yet, not where they are. And so,
which is just like open fields, which at least is,
yeah. So they're trying to
that's crazy.
Like make a trail for themselves. And so Brent's job is he's supposed to actually like I didn't know this, but they're actually called blazes.
Yep.
And so, because you use a hatchet and you cut both sides, like big chunks out of the tree, so then you can see when you're going and then when you're coming back. So like he's not doing it really good. It's like not a good job.
I thought you said this guy's athletic.
I know.
So,
but he won't see them. So Adam has to take over doing this now. So he's doing the blazes. He's navigating at the same time.
But then blazing is also to make sure that you can track where you've gone. So if you get lost, you can double back.
Of course. So he's navigating using a compass to figure out where they're going, how to get there. He's blazing the trail, and then he's kind of keeping up like a constant dialogue to keep Brent's morale up, because he can tell like he's just like, it's not. Yeah. And so Brent is just like, no, I want to go home. Everything's horrible. I'm done. And Adam's like, no, you don't have a choice. We're here. Like, no one's coming. Like, we got to go on. And Brent's like, no, I want to call the pilot back, and I want to go. And he's like, well, it's going to be a lot of money. And Adam just like, he's mad. Like he says, like, he gets furious at Brent's poor effort and his obstinate refusal to push on. And so they end up going back to the camp at the first night. And so
after how long?
Like a night.
One night is
like one night. And the next day when they're trying to blaze this trail. And so they go back and they see a caribou in the water. And so that kind of like lifts Brent's spirits a little bit. And they start talking about all these different adventure stories and all this stuff. And he tells Brent how a few weeks of hardship is worth it for a lifetime of proud reflection. And he says, you are what you make yourself into.
Yeah, 100%.
So he gives Brent a few new route options, because he's like, okay, I guess he doesn't want to do this crazy portage. There's no freaking trail. So he gives him another route option. And so at this point, they were going to go all the way down what's called the Sutton River to Hudson's Bay, and then go kind of around Hudson's Bay coastline, and then to another river, go up that river to try and find the headwaters. Instead of portaging, they're going to go down a river across.
Right.
Across.
So how long do they have on this trip? Like, how long was it supposed to be planned for?
He doesn't talk about time. So I don't know how he was out for long. He was out really for like any of these expeditions, to be honest. So, anyways, so they're paddling down this Sutton River, and at one point, this is like a week into their trip, at one point he sends Brent to go collect wood for the fire, right?
And never heard from again.
No, he comes back with a whole fucking tree. He cut down a fucking tree.
That's not what you're supposed to do.
So, and he's like constantly insisting, no, it'll burn. Adam's like,
no,
dude, greenwood doesn't burn. Like, you got to look for deadfall. Like, this is like, this is like
fire 101.
Yeah. And so like literally after like this whole week, like Brent's learned nothing, right?
Yeah.
Like you'd think you'd learn something. And so even like Adam, he always has like a fishing rod with him to catch fish to eat. And Brent's even too squirmish to even let him kill the fish. He's like, oh no, I'll put it back in the lake. And it's just like,
what are you going to eat?
What are you going to eat? Like, so,
how much food did they bring?
I think they brought enough, but like the nice fresh, like fish is going to be awesome. So they they're still going down this first river, and he describes Brent as almost being like in a comatose state, and he says as if the incessant bugs and dreary weather had left him shell-shocked. And so by this point, Adam is doing everything. He's paddling, he's navigating, making the fire, cooking, setting everything up, repacking their packs, like everything. And he said, wrenched from the cozy, work-free life he had been living, Brent was finding the rigors of our daily routine a tough adjustment.
Yeah, to say the least.
Yeah. So, but what he does say is that...
I don't know. It sounds like heaven to me.
I know. So he does talk a little bit about, and this is a little bit about how Ross Edgley talked about morale and everything. And he said, like, even though he was really frustrated, they never really got angry with each other. And he says, the history of exploration had taught me that camaraderie and good interpersonal dynamics were crucial to success. Since Brent and I were together all day and slept side by side in a tiny tent with a shotgun and an assortment of knives between us, it was essential that we remain on good terms.
Well, it seems like he had to do it more than the other guy because he had to just not lose his shit because he had to do literally everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, could you imagine having to set up your tent, everything quickly? Like, it's so much work.
It's so much work. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you're like having this one person that's
they're just sitting there, not doing anything. How could you, anyways?
Yeah.
Good for him to be able to keep his calm and cool under that situation, because that's horrible.
Well, and then not only that, and this goes a little bit to what Ross Edgley talked about too. So remember when we talked about how the guy in the POW camp, how he wasn't like, oh, we're going to be rescued by this time. We're getting rescued by this time.
Right. It's just that they're going to be rescued.
Yes. And so Brent sets himself up. So for like a kind of in a similar fashion. So they know they're almost at the mouth of the Sutton River, which empties into Hudson's Bay. And so they know that there's this kind of abandoned camp there, like a building. And so Brent builds it up in his mind, like, oh, I bet you it's really nice. I bet you there's like beds there that we can sleep on. And he builds it up. Well, when they get there, it's like almost falling down. Like Adam's like, I don't even know how this thing is still like up. And there's just these like wire bed frames.
To even be there almost.
Yeah. And so that just like, again,
just shoots him
down. And so Brent's like, I'm done. Call the plane. I'm out. I can't do it. And so.
Not even doing anything.
Yeah. And so.
first part.
Yeah. And so Brent tries to convince Adam to go with him, and even like the pilot that comes to pick Brent up is like, well, you should just come, like, you can't stay out here, you can't do this on your own. And I'm just like, no, like, this is what I've committed to, like, I'm doing this, I have to do this.
Probably have a better time on his own anyways. Doesn't have to carry all this dead weight with him.
Yeah, I think so. And he says, I trusted in my own abilities and told myself that the best asset was my mind. As long as I remained calm and level-headed, I could overcome any situation. So really, he's like a lot of the people that we've read about, he's just really mentally strong. Yep. Like he knows how to survive in the wilderness and has those skills, but also it's that mental resilience and capacity.
Yeah, it's one thing to know how to survive, but it's also to be able to deal with the constant, like I said, the cold, the injuries, the wet, and there's the overall physical toll that something like that takes on you, right? Yeah. Like, you're not doing 100 marathons in 100 days or whatever it is, but you're constantly on the move. You're constantly doing something. It's like nonstop, right? Yeah. In very poor conditions. So it's very physically taxing, and then at the same time, then that makes it mentally taxing as well.
Yeah. And then so this part, I don't know if he meant this to be funny, but I found it funny because Brent's gone and he's, kind of redoing his route and figuring out what he's going to do and how he's going to, what river he's going to look for now. And so he's thinking about being alone, and he thinks about the fact that, like most of the great explorers and even some of the well-known current ones don't go on their own, and suggest that you probably shouldn't be going on your own because the consequences of even something small happening are way bigger.
Yeah.
But then he talks about the main character from the movie The Revenant.
Oh, right. Yeah.
His name's Hugh Glass. He got like completely
mauled by the bear,
almost killed by the bear, and talks, and like it's a true story about what happened. And so that guy crawls back to whatever fort it was, and this is in the 1800s.
Didn't he have somebody help him get rehabilitate his wounds?
No. He was completely on his own with all of his wounds, kind of basically crawling, and then he builds himself this raft to go down the water, the river, and everything. So that's who he's thinking about, and it makes him feel better.
Yeah,
I'm like,
if this guy can do it,
you do it. Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh,
I should see that movie again.
I know, that's what I was thinking when he was describing it, because he was telling the story, and I was like, I feel like that's the Revenant guy. Yeah. And then I looked it up, and it is the Revenant guy.
Seems like a movie.
I know. So he ends up charting this nameless tributary. He canoes up to the headwaters, and it's all upriver, so it's a pain in the butt to canoe.
Yeah. So
he's either canoeing or he's dragging upriver. So he looks at it and everything, and he's just having the time of his life. It's amazing. And so then he gets to the headwaters and turns back around and goes back down to towards Hudson Bay, where he's going to get picked up by a plane as well. So what's kind of crazy is he's on his way back and he sees off in the distance these white boulders.
Okay.
And he's like, oh, those white boulders, those are really big boulders.
Pure diamond.
No, it's a polar bear.
Oh, yeah. That's not a boulder at all.
So he has his gun with him. And so he's kind of like...
Yeah, I guess he doesn't worry so much about like grizzlies or black bears. But polar bears. You don't want to mess with.
Well, he tells... And this is a cool thing about his stories is he always kind of goes off on tangents. I don't think they're tangents though, because it's like telling like the history and everything.
Yeah.
And so he's talking a lot about polar bears and just how... significant and how different they are from grizzlies or black bears.
Because they're like 100% carnivores and hunters, right?
They are the biggest land carnivore ever. And so the biggest recorded one was 2,200 pounds and 11 feet tall. And like these things,
when it was standing up.
Yes. And so like these things, a lot of people that go out on these expeditions, they'll have this like electric fencing that they'll put up around their camps to hopefully deter. Yeah. But like he was talking about one expedition where there was 12 people and they had the electric fencing up. It didn't matter. Like they went through it and then they killed one person.
Until they,
yeah. And so I was
going to say he's going to kill all 12. It's like, holy jeez. But they shot it down after it got one anyways.
I guess. And then he talks about this other event where there's polar bear. I don't know what happened, but the polar bear drags this guy out into the middle of Main Street in this one town and just eats this guy in the middle of Main Street. It's just
on
eating
a street.
This guy. Yeah.
Well, what town is this?
I don't know. Somewhere up north. He talks about it though. So.
Jeez.
Yeah. So anyway, so he sees this polar bear and the polar bear kind of runs away, so he makes sure he has his shotgun. He can't see where the polar bear goes.
It's camouflaged.
Well, it's not camouflaged, but he can't. It's so thick, right? Yeah. And so he goes through, and then
does he say he's scared or?
Like he's like, you make sure his gun's loaded or whatever, and like he's such a nature guy. He's like, he kind of like made the agreement with himself that he wasn't going to shoot unless it like absolutely necessary.
Right. Yeah. He's not like, I'm going to find it.
No.
Yeah.
So he's going down. He's still kind of wary, kind of looking around. And then again, in the river he's going on, he sees again, like these two big boulders. He's like, oh, like those are huge boulders in like the middle of the river. What the fuck?
No, they're bears.
No, it's a fucking giant bear. This thing is so huge.
Grizzly or polar?
It's a polar bear. He's like, this thing was at least 1,000 pounds. Like I've never seen anything like it before. It's huge.
Yeah.
So yeah, this thing gets within 13 feet of him. Like that's how close, because the bear gets in the water, starts kind of swimming after him. He has pictures on his Instagram of this bear in the water.
Well, he's going downstream towards it, so he can't even really slow down.
He can't slow down.
Oh shit, here we go.
Yeah, so he has his gun, and this thing has no fear of him. It's like growling and snarling at him.
Yeah, it's not like a black bear is just gonna start running away.
No. So he gets by without incident, luckily. But then he gets back.
Was he like shouting at it or like waving, making himself big?
He didn't say anything, but he had his gun and he
like how
was
big
ready.
Across the river is this?
I don't know.
So he's like, I'm gonna try to stay on this
he
side.
Did, like he says, he tries to stay as far away. But then even he's like, I don't know on the other side, is there bears in there? Because he can't even see. Like I don't know where is safe, kind of thing. So then
nowhere.
So then he gets back to like that little shack or whatever at the mouth of the Hudson Bay where they picked up Brent. And so he's just like, I don't know where the fuck this bear is. Like, I don't know what's going on.
He's getting hunted.
Yeah. And so he gets into the shack and he tries to do what he can to kind of like block the door with these like old wire bread frames.
Yeah. It's 1,000 pounds.
Yeah. And that's, and he knows this, right? So obviously like that whole night he's not sleeping because it's just like, he has his gun. Yeah. So then eventually the next day, the pilot comes to pick him up and he's like, you better get in here quick because like there is a huge polar bear coming down the river.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he saw it too. And he's like, and the pilot's like an old trapper, old guy. He's like, that's the biggest bear I've ever seen.
Oh, really?
Here. Yeah. So it was like no joke. So yeah. So
he was probably hunting him. Well, maybe not hunting him, but
yeah. Yeah.
So they have pretty good senses, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Probably smell them.
Yeah. So he does that, and he gets a job, I think later on that summer, fall, winter, whatever, teaching survival skills to kids at this kind of camp. And so I only mention this because he says the kids picked up fire making better than Brent did.
Yeah.
So
well, they're in a nice, calm environment, I guess. So maybe then it's a little bit easier to take in. But
it was just really funny. And so he spends that winter kind of like writing his report up and all that admin type stuff. He goes on a bunch of speaking engagements. And then the Canadian Geographic also offers him a job to make this big historical map of North America as well. So he's working on that. And then he goes to British Columbia for 3 weeks to study petroglyphs, because that's what he ends up doing his doctorate on.
Oh.
So, and that kind of little aside into BC was really interesting too.
So he's got his PhD, eh?
Yeah.
In what?
I can't remember.
Is it more like geography type?
More like history, geography, because he does a lot of like the petroglyphs.
Yeah,
and
who's
stuff like
his
that.
supervisor?
I don't know. Yeah, I can't. Some of this, he doesn't talk a lot about himself in terms of that. Like he's very modest and very humble.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, and then he also goes on like all of these different like archaeological digs in Niagara and Ohio. So he's really busy and just you know.
Yeah.
But eventually he decides he can't get this again river out of his mind, and so he wants to go do it again.
Right. And that is, I think, the basics of this book, though, of him going on that river, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, being just kind of left in the Hudson Bay Lowlands, like this guy like abandons you. That's kind of a big deal too, right? Like,
right, I guess.
Yeah. So, but it's just funny because he said, "I see the irony in the name of this." This river again.
Yeah.
So when he can't get anyone to go with him, so he's like, well, I knew, I did all that on my own. Is
this before he did that Mackenzie River one that we talked about?
Yes.
So this is before.
This is his, yeah.
Okay, so then because that maybe he does this too, then he knows like, okay, I can go on this like 4-month long one. Well,
and he even said like his first kind of time that he went out by himself was when he was 13, and he went camping by himself. So so he goes back to the again. But the water levels are really, really low this time, so he has to go at a different starting point, which is fine. But
it's more portaging.
So to get to the headwaters, he has to do 15 kilometers of portaging to like across like shitty muskeg and like all of this stuff to get to the headwaters. And even just to try and find the path, like he didn't even really take much of his stuff just because he just wanted hands free so he could try and navigate to find it. It took him 4 hours even just to find where the headwaters were. So he finally gets to them. And he's just like, it's just like paradise. Like it's just
the river.
Yeah. He's just like, it's so beautiful. And he talks about, in the other river that he was looking at too, he talks about how just like the description of the forests, and how the one forest he was like, it felt like really eerie, and he had like this vague sense of uneasiness in this one part of the forest. And that really reminded me of the difference in the feeling that I had when we were in Algonquin Park versus in Killarney. Like Algonquin, you feel like, well, there's so many people here. Like you feel like you're in the wilderness, but it's still like not quite.
Sure.
It's really explored, I feel. And
of course.
Yeah. And there's always lots of people there. And then we get to Killarney, and that's a different feel. Like that one felt weird, like wild, more wild to me there.
Yeah. Even though there's still a lot of people, but not nearly as much.
And then when we got to Quetico, that one felt eerie to me. I felt really, really sketched out in Quetico. It was weird.
But not because there was anything unsafe about it. You know what I mean?
No, but it's just, I found that interesting that
way more isolated.
Yeah, but I guess I just found that interesting that he described it that way too, because I was like, yeah, there is different feelings depending on where you are. Like, so it's interesting.
What part did he say he felt eerie? Just through that portage?
No. This was in the summer before when he was with Brent, after Brent had one of the forests one of the rivers he went up.
He said that one felt
he
eerie.
said that one felt eerie.
Yeah.
So
maybe it's just a combination of how it looks, and if it's maybe also with the bear scare or whatever, you might feel that uneasiness or what have you.
Yeah. Well, the bear scare wasn't until after that. But he says, and he's like, people ask me all the time if like I'm afraid of exploring alone. And it's interesting because again, this parallels to Cheryl Strayed's story and going on her own. And he says, I am too in love with adventure and the allure of the unknown to let fear stand in my way. Yeah. So while I certainly have felt fear in the wilderness, most of the time I ignore it or embrace it. Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. So
again, as long as you don't do anything stupid, like the grizzly man guy or whatever it is, you're going to. There's a good chance you're going to be safe.
Yeah. So again, he is on this canoe, this 13-foot canoe. This is the same one he brings, and so
which is okay if it's just you.
Well, right? Yeah, but this
old
boat's
and banged up.
It's getting banged up, and so what he finds on this river is like. There's a lot of rapids, a lot of rapids that he didn't expect because the satellite you can't really see that. And also it depends on different water levels over different years, what you're going to see. Right. So he gets to a point where.
Is he really skilled at navigating rapids?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So, but he's paddling and the current's like all of a sudden at this one point, like it's really, really speeding across and, all of a sudden, and so he's like kind of going over some of these like larger drops.
Sorry, does he wear a life jacket when he goes on?
Yes. Yeah. And a helmet. Yeah. He has a helmet on. And so he hears this like deafening roar.
Yeah, that's not good.
And it's like he can't backpedal, like he's going over. Like he's going over. So yeah, so he's flung over this waterfall. So it's a kind of a 2-step waterfall. So it sounds like he goes over
by the time you notice it, it's like, oh well,
you're done.
What are you gonna do?
And so he goes over the one, and the boat kind of gets filled up with water, and then gets broadsided, and then he goes down the next one, and he's out. Like he's out, just and
a total flipped over.
Yeah, and the hull gets like crushed in, so he has to try and get all of his gear plus the canoe, and he's like, "What the fuck?" So he has to like kick the canoe out so he can use it because he still needs to
try to
down
get
this river. Yeah, so
get to a place where he can get rescued. Not rescued, but picked up or whatever.
So he estimates that the upper drop was 1 meter, and then the second drop was like 6 meters.
Okay, that's not terrible.
And so what happened?
Was it really deep though? So
well,
at least
it was deep, but because the river narrowed, it made it even faster. So it narrowed to like 7 meters. So crossing it at this like big torrent at the bottom, and so he was like. Because that water was coming down so fast, he kept being pushed down. So I think he really...
Almost drowned.
Yeah, I think so. So he kind of makes these vows to himself that he's never going to go alone again into unexplored territory. Yeah. And he's going to get out of his boat and scout the white water before he goes down it. Yeah. Which he breaks both of these vows later on after the fact.
No, of course.
Yeah, and so then he
I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah, so he kicks it and he hammers and fixes his canoe and then uses duct tape for any of the holes that he finds. I mean, what else are you gonna do, right? So so he continues to find all of these waterfalls, and he ends up finding like 5 uncharted waterfalls along this river that have never been seen before.
The waterfalls along the main river, right?
Yeah. So, and he says, in our age of satellite technology and high-tech gadgetry, no substitute exists for the pure, simple pleasure and honest rewards of being in a remote, unknown place. Yep. So,
did you take pictures of it?
Yeah. So he makes descriptions.
Still works.
Yeah. So
that's amazing.
So yeah. So he just finds all these. So then he gets so the river empties into the more major Harricana River that then empties into James Bay. And so he gets to the entrance of James Bay. And so I didn't know this, but apparently James Bay is really well known for being like having crazy storms and people being stranded and never heard from again on this part of the bay.
Well, I can imagine. I mean, it's remote. already,
Yeah.
right? So
So
mixed in with that, if there's like storms that get in there, maybe things get funneled or whatever. I have no idea.
I don't know, but even like he was even saying like that, even those bays, Hudson Bay and James Bay, even those are not well mapped. Like their surfaces and
Look how far north it is. It's
so
insane. Just look at the maps. Like holy shit, look how far that is.
Yeah.
I mean, even when we're around like the French River, when that goes, I think it drains into, what is it, Huron or whatever.
Yeah.
Even they say there's like, even when we're camping, they're like, just be careful where you're going, because if there's any storms pick up, there's a lot of turbulent or whatever can happen. Yeah. So you gotta be careful, especially when you're on open water. And that's just a Great Lake, not about, I mean, it's still pretty big, right?
Yeah.
But like Hudson Bay, and like that's,
I know.
it's huge,
It's
a lot bigger, a lot colder. Like it's.
Yeah. Exactly. Yep. So because of this, he decides he's not going to canoe from that opening of James Bay to Moose Factory, which is where he would then take the Polar Bear Express train back to Cochrane.
Mm-hmm.
So he calls on the sat phone, like people that have like motorboats that are going to come and pick him up and then take him back to Moose Factory. So like how far is it that he's in from a place where no one has ever explored before to like, oh yeah, someone's just gonna come on the boat and pick me up? Well, no.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, no. So he takes the Again River. The Again River drains into the Harry Cana River.
Right. So he went all the way.
Yes.
Yeah. Into like the bigger river.
Yeah.
And
then on James Bay, and then so they come from Moose Factory. They pick him up, but even on their way back to Moose Factory,
just a storm.
The engine stops.
Oh, that's not good.
It's really rough, and so they have to go back and wait a couple hours for it to calm down, and then they go back, and then their engine stops. So now it's dark, and so they call for another boat to come and get them.
Like a tugboat.
Yeah, well, it's actually exactly the same type of boat that comes and get them, but the motor just works. The outboard motor still works. So eventually they get towed. They're lucky though; they could have just been lost at nighttime.
They're in a boat, so they'll be. I'm sure they'd be okay.
Yeah. So, but they kept because it was so rough, they kept getting swept out, right? So that could have been a problem.
Right.
So
the engines are down, so they can't. They're just like adrift. Yeah. No.
Yeah. So it's funny because he's like, when all this is happening, he's just like, I wonder if it would have been safer if I had just canoed to Moose Factory rather than wait for these guys. So, So. You would think like, okay, he's canoed it, he's done his thing, and this was just all on his own, like no sponsorship. No. Do you know
how long did he go on this Again River? Like how long?
So it's about 100 kilometers. 100 kilometers. A little over 100 kilometers.
So he did that in what? A couple days? Do you know?
I don't know.
Maybe not even 100 kilometers. Well, I don't know. I don't know how many kilometers you can do in a day. Because if you're going down river, it's pretty fast, and obviously it'd be pretty quick. But
yeah. So he's still obsessed with this river because he's found these like 5 uncharted waterfalls plus all these rapids and everything like that, and he still hasn't been able to find like any of like the surveyor's records from the 1930s when they were mapping out and putting the boundary in between Ontario and Quebec.
Ontario, yep.
Yeah, so he still so he keeps looking, and eventually he does find the surveyor's notes on it, but definitely they didn't see any of the waterfalls. There's no mention of any of the waterfalls, so they didn't go that far up the river enough to see it.
Oh, why would they?
Yeah. So now it's 2013, and he's gonna plan out an expedition a bit more carefully. He ends up getting a grant with again Canadian Geographic, and he also gets like a bunch of sponsors this time. So now he has like an actual GPS to take with him, so he can actually
doesn't even have a GPS.
No, he's just taking a compass.
Even for us, we have our GPS thing when we're going around. It's like, I'm not going without that. I know. It's crazy.
So now he's...
And it's not like this is like 1970. It's
2013.
I know. Just get a Garmin.
So he gets like a GPS so he can plot the waterfalls, and him and his dad rig something up so they can actually like measure how big the waterfalls are as well. And then...
this will be much easier than this time around. I'll have proper gear.
You would think so.
Oh, here we go.
So he gets other sponsorships from like other like local like outdoor kind of stores and that sort of thing. But like what I don't understand is why couldn't he get someone to donate him a canoe or a better one? Because again, he takes this canoe this 13-foot canoe that's been bent and broken.
But like,
again.
what is it with like, you say he's getting these grants, whatever? Are they giving him like $10?
I
like,
don't know.
You know, like
I don't
I could
know.
just spend like spending all this time writing a proposal. Like, you know, if he's got his PhD or whatever, he should know how to write proposals, and he's getting all this stuff together. And like, what for? What you would he get $2,000? Like,
I don't know. He doesn't talk about how much money he got, but I'm just
You
like,
know,
well,
like
you couldn't get a sponsor to give you a fucking canoe.
But you know what I think though? Like, if you're doing these things, like if you're gonna, like, say even if it's 50,000, like I don't even want to know how much it costs just for like a plane ride. You know, it could be like 10, 15 grand or whatever to coordinate all that in the boats. So like the pickup and drop off alone is probably worth so, and shipping all your gear or whatever up there.
Yeah.
So I could imagine that takes up a bulk of the money, but still, like $2,000-$3,000 to get like a top of the line tip top light canoe that's strong like, or whatever it is.
I know.
Yeah.
So he also,
some people like their beat up canoes though.
Well, I know,
a point of pride maybe even,
and I think that's what it is with this one, because he's been through so much with it, so I get it. So he starts actually getting quite a bit of press about this, and I don't know, I didn't hear about this guy. I don't even know how I ended up hearing about him to begin with.
Yeah, I don't know either.
But he gets contacted by like a freelance journalist from in the UK that wants to write a little something about him. And he doesn't think too much about it because she's freelance. She's not really associated with anybody. And she's just like, yeah, I don't know if anyone's going to pick this up, but you're interesting. I want to write about you. Yeah. It does end up getting picked up by The Guardian, and then it just explodes. Yeah. And so he's getting so many requests for interviews and media. CBC does stuff with him. These idiots, they want to send someone to go with him, and he's like, well, have you ever been in a canoe before? And they're like, no. And he's like, maybe not this time. Like, I don't think so. Yeah. So of course the media, they just being what they are, they get they get so much stuff wrong about his story, about what he's doing, because there's a big difference between something that's like first ever to happen or first on record. And so you can't prove he's the first ever to be on this river, but definitely first on record, right? So it's a different thing. And so I think he's frustrated just because there's like a bunch of like misrepresentation.
Because they're saying he's the first ever person to be down this river. It's like, yeah, probably not.
And he's such a humble guy. Like you could understand like this would be like it would really bother him probably. And not only that, like he's really like, I think he's like a really introverted, and so all this attention I can understand would be not awesome. I mean, the guy canoes across the fucking Arctic by himself, so he likes to be below, fly under the radar, right? So he gets there, and the guy his driver that drives him to the drop off is just like, this year's completely different from last year. The water level this year is
super high,
crazy high. It's like 1.5 meters higher than last year. It's been a super wet summer. So it's going to be
much more rapid,
much more dangerous. But he says to be in the woods was to be home. So it's just, you can tell he's like glad to be away from the media circus. Yeah. So he, at one point, kind of loses focus, is not paying 100% attention, and ends up wrapping his canoe around a boulder. Yeah. So he's able to get out. It's just funny because his poor canoe has just been through so much, and he gets wrapped around a boulder again. So, so he's able to measure the height of all of these different waterfalls. Of course, they're shorter this year because the water level's higher. And so he estimates that it's about, the highest one was about 6 meters that year. So the year previous, he estimates it would have been about 8 meters tall. So that's the tallest one. So so there's between 5 and 9 waterfalls. I guess there's different ways to classify waterfalls. So there's some that go around islands that some people might not consider waterfalls, that kind of
splits.
So they wouldn't kind of consider them that way, but like they kind of are. So that's why he says between 5 to 9 different waterfalls.
But a waterfall classically then would be just like the whole river, and then it just drops like all the water.
But even then it's different, because there's some that are constantly in contact with the bedrock, and then sometimes there are ones that are not in contact. So it's different. Sometimes they're horseshoes, they can just be all different. And it's interesting, there are some pictures that you can look up and kind of see what the waterfalls look like, because he took pictures. So yeah, so then he returns, and the Royal Canadian Geographical Society elects him as a fellow, which is kind of a big deal because all like the famous explorers from like the UK and everything were all fellows of their Royal Geographical Societies.
He must have really thought that was, I don't know, touching or whatever.
I think
or
so.
You know
I
what
think
mean?
to be like
lot of
among
pride for that.
giants,
Yeah.
absolutely, like the people that he looked up to. And then he got to present the flag, the Geographical Society's flag. He took pictures with it when he was on the river.
Mm-hmm.
He was able to present that to the Governor General at a ceremony, so that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
And that was the Johnston guy that was the president of our university.
Yeah, David Johnston.
UW. Yeah, David Johnston. Yeah. So then he says, again, like all the other rivers I had explored before, it seemed only to increase my appetite for greater challenges. And so this is when he starts planning for his next journey across the Arctic.
Yeah, and that was also because it was Cannon's 150th birthday, right?
Yep. So he did that one in 2017, in the spring of 2017. So, so that's the story.
Yeah, from 1867.
Yeah.
Confederation.
Yeah. So I read first, and then we listened to it as a family, that book, which was unreal.
Yep.
What I love the most about Adam is you can tell like just how much he loves to be in the outdoors and how important it is to him that we preserve these wild places.
Yeah.
But he knows it's not just like knowing survival. He knows so much like about
the history,
the geography, even the geology.
Yep.
He knows so much about like the different flora and fauna, because he was even like keeping track of those things as well,
like the plants and everything. And
well, and even when he went with Brent that summer, they found bald eagles nests and that far north. And the thing is like ornithologists were just like, well, no, they don't go that far north, but because no one had really been that far north, you don't even know, right? So he was able to even kind of find that out. So it's really, and not only that, but he talks a lot to like the indigenous people that were there, because he talked a lot to them to find out if anybody knew about the Again River, just to see what they knew about it, and no one had really,
because that's where that the traditional knowledge will come into play, because a lot of that stuff it's not written down, but it's just passed on from elder to elder, oral histories. So that was really interesting. Not only that, like he knows about like different teas to make from all the different edible plants. Yeah, he knows what to eat, what you can't eat, or whatever. If whatever happens where there's no food or whatever.
And like he even used, because with his thumb, he even used some sort of like moss that he found to like help with like absorbent, or I don't know what he used it for, but it was some sort of medicinal purpose.
Maybe to help keep out infection. Maybe, like
exactly.
Antifungal or whatever, or whatever would infect antiviral, whatever. Bacterial, whatever.
And then he knows like all of the stories, like some of like he talked in one part, he talked about like the Wendigo, so like this myth of this cannibalistic monster that the indigenous people had. So he talks a lot about that. So it's like it's so much all together. Like it's that's what I really like about it.
The holistic approach, and you're going in there, and like you said, all the science he's doing, and all the different fields of science, whether it's geology about the rocks or about the land, or whether it's the birds or the plants and the animals, like it's all kinds of, and then the weather and the climate, and like I said, then he's surveying the waterfalls himself, and like there's so many different fields, and it's just kind of encompassing everything, which is just amazing.
It's amazing.
And just even there's that, like when you're in an unexplored place, it's like every observation you make is just like so valuable and just adds so much to the science and to the knowledge of something. It's quite amazing.
And that's why like this book was really good. And then Beyond the Trees, that's why I wanted the kids to listen to it, because it was all like histories and knowledge of Canada that like you don't learn that in school, right? And so that's why I really wanted the kids to listen to it, which was awesome. And then his latest book, actually I forget what it's called now, but it was interesting because it was trying to find it. He went to Labrador with a friend, so it's called The Whisper on the Night Wind. And so he was trying to investigate this big old wilderness legend, and it was called the Traverspine Beast. And so him and his friend were trying to look for this Traverspine Beast. There had been this legend of this beast that had come. And
so this is fake. Like this.
Well,
Travis Spine.
Beast. Yeah. So, and there was actually like firsthand accounts of people seeing this thing, and so he went to go.
Giant polar bear. I don't know.
Well, not in Labrador. Well, so when he goes through like what it could have been and different things, and they even set up trail cams, and there's the ending is just like, oh my gosh, that is scary.
Interesting.
So anyways, so that was a really good book as well. I can't recommend it enough. He's a really good writer.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So crazy. So that being said, we are kind of talking about this. So what do you recommend this book in terms of just a read?
Oh, 10
1
out
to
of 10. 10 out of 10.
Obviously. Why else would you give anything other than 10 out of 10? Yeah. And in terms of adventure and what you would like to do, or if there's anything in what he does that you would like to incorporate into our lives to go on an adventure, what do you rate that?
Yeah, like I'd love to go back out on the canoe. Like it is really awesome. And I think having that struggle and
and when our canoe is, like you said, it's going to Algonquin Park. It's not the struggle there.
No,
it's not the struggle here.
The only thing is just the bugs.
So
how he describes the bugs. He describes at one point like he coughing because he inhaled so many black flies. Like that's so disgusting. Like there's so much.
Is he just immune to the bites at this point?
I just think maybe he's just like used to them, and he has a bug net that he wears. I don't know how much that's gonna help.
Well, remember the ones that we had. Fuck. They help.
I guess.
You know what I mean?
I don't know.
But the thing is I can imagine a bug net like that being so much better up north, because then at least if it's not so hot, because of ours it's like you're wearing that bug net, it's like also 30 degrees and it's like you're just boiling because you're in this big huge sweater. So but not that it doesn't get warm in the north, of course it does if he's going in the middle of the summer or whatever. But and I guess he doesn't use like any DEET or any that kind of stuff too.
Like sometimes, but he's just like, it doesn't really help very much.
Yeah. Or
when you get up there to that point of bug,
that's what I mean. There's just so many, right? Like even if it's 99% effective. Yeah. Well, there's like 10,000 of them.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's
so you'll still get bit by 1%. Okay, so 1,000 of them. That'll like, screw this DEET. I'm getting that blood or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it was really good. And apparently him and Brent are still friends.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, I guess so.
So I mean, like let's back up a little bit and talk about like our trip and what we had planned.
Yeah.
So do you have any? Because we were going. The whole idea was to tent across different places and do some canoe trips or what have you. Do you regret, or would you do it differently in our idea to like just ditch the tent and go for a trailer instead? And should it be like, oh, you know what? Well, we should have just kept with the tent and the canoe kind of way to go about it.
I think that's a lot. I think it's a lot of work. I mean, it's different. He's just by himself, so he just has to deal with stuff.
Well, not all the time, but
mostly like cooking for himself. Like I'm thinking of his big long one in the Arctic, because that one he left in the spring, and then I think he ended up at his spot in like September. So that's,
I can't remember. I think it was good.
It was
over the summer. Yeah.
So like that's a long time, and I found it really tiring. Everything was difficult. Like just doing anything was hard, and a lot of work was involved, and I felt I couldn't enjoy things as much because everything was just so hard.
Or because we're
honest,
always on the go to get to the next site.
So
but
that
you could also plan things differently, right? Where it doesn't always have to be on the go. It could be like, we're going to get this one place and we're going to stay for a week or whatever it is.
Yeah. Yep, you could. But I think there's a happy medium between, because I did enjoy canoeing on the lake, and I loved trying to navigate, like trying to find where we should go and stuff like that. So I really enjoyed that. But I think there's a happy medium between doing that all the time and then having like, maybe having a trailer as well. Like I know that's obviously expensive, but like, I think there's a happy medium to be had there. Yeah.
So what about planning some other type of adventure? Like, would you do something like, you know what, we're going to go down some kind of river that's never been not never been explored, but you know what I mean? As opposed to, okay, it's one thing to like, oh, I'm going to journey across Algonquin. Okay, great. But what about like, oh, no, I'm going to go down this more wild river. Like you hear those people that, they'll kind of almost canoe across Canada or whatever, right? Where they'll start somewhere and they just end up all the way, because it's almost all connected, right? I mean, obviously there's some portages, but it's like something like that. It's like, I'm going to do that over the summer. That
would be cool for sure to have like that kind of plan. I think you would have to be very, very experienced, like to do something like that.
Or we could just do it.
I knew you were going to say that.
This other guy he brings along, right? No, he can't even light a fire.
I know.
At least I could light a fire. But you know what I mean? Like if you're, if you plan something and it's not going to be forever, it's just like, I'm going to spend a couple months. We're going to go down this epic adventure.
Yeah. If there's
get some sponsors or whatever, right? Or
like if there's a definite end date to it, like I think that's.
Oh, for sure.
I think like when we were in Algonquin, that was one thing because we knew it was a certain amount of time and I knew like we were going to get to showers and breakfast. You know what I mean? So
even something like that in terms of preparing, maybe it'd be like, you know what? We're going to do like a 2-week trip.
100%.
And you can do something where it's like, you can get drops of food too, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's Algonquin Park. It's not, but fuck, wherever the hell up north, right? Where the only way in is like through helicopter or boat plane or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, that would still be really cool too, though.
I'm there. You know me. I'd love to do something like that.
I just think it's a different way to see the country.
Yep.
And I think
that's, I want to say the real way. It's not the real way, but it's like, I want to do both. Sorry.
Yes. No. Go.
To me, there's two things that I love about in terms of exploring Canada and how I always want to do it. Number one, I want to just like in a car or whatever, I want to drive and I just want to go along the roads and I want to go to different towns, see different people and see everything through on the road and have that landscape. And you drive the Yukon, whatever, just drive everywhere. Yeah. So that's the one way. And then you see the people and you get an idea of everyone. So
and just to add to that was one thing I really did enjoy so much was seeing different northern cities. Like I had never been to Sault Ste. Marie, I had never been to Thunder Bay, and I loved being able to explore those cities and see what they were like, even compared to Sudbury as well. Yeah. So I loved that. I really did. Yeah. Yeah. So
that's one way to go, and I love that too. And then the other way is to, like you get to a spot and you just like go on your canoe and then you just go down the rivers, go down the lakes and get to these like remote areas where you can explore the wilderness and the beauty of the land that we do have and feel connected to the land. And, all those things you hear, like I want to be one with the land and connected or whatever. That's to me is also really appealing and has a good call to me, even though I've never really done much of that. Even though, like I said, when I grew up, I was always going out in my yard, but this just around the lake and around whatever, but it's still, I just love being outside. So I never really went on any expeditions or canoe trips or anything like that, but I still just love being outside and being outdoors. So that really kind of speaks to me as well too. So I think of like, I'd love to go up to the Yukon or somewhere and just like get some river and just go down a river and just have a week, like people that do those things where they have a kayak or whatever and they go down and they just kind of explore and go down like old like fur trade routes or whatever it is, all that kind of stuff.
But I guess like that's where I'm saying like I feel like you can do both at the same time. For me, that would be the best because you have that time where you're not having to like try and figure out meals and eat dehydrated food all the time.
And that was our plan. I think it was like we have this trailer, so like for example, like you said Quetico, you go have a trailer, you park at Quetico, you got the canoe, and it's like, okay, well, let's do a 1 week loop around Quetico or whatever it is. Okay, whatever, pack up, drive to the next town, see that or whatever. What's the next little adventure that we're gonna have?
Exactly. That's the best of both worlds for me.
So when are we doing it?
I don't know.
I'd love to do this. So what if there's a way, like thinking, outside the box, I guess a little bit, because a lot of people say, there's all kinds of grants for so many different things,
Yeah.
right? Like whether it's filming or whatever, writing, like, can we not reach out to people or whoever or like write things, say like, this is what we want to do.
Yeah.
We want to go travel across Canada, document people, meet people, interview people, podcast, whatever, you know what I mean? Whatever it is, do you want to support us in this adventure or whatever? Here's our plan.
Yeah.
You know, get sponsors or again, write grants. Cause like there's this Canadian Film Board, like there's gotta be all kinds of, I mean, our government loves spending money, so maybe there's money for this, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. There's gotta, like, how cool would that be to somehow get like
even
a bunch of grants and it's like, okay, here's $100,000 to go make your film. Like, there's film boards, like millions of dollars to make these films.
This one, I don't know if you watched it with me. It was on Prime. I think it was called Departures, and it was like this, like a reality show of these two guys that were buddies, I guess, that rented a camper and were driving it across the country. And so they were being filmed and they did it. And I don't think they were anybody big or like I didn't really recognize who they were. So I know that
was a long time ago. Yeah, they got a camper. I remember seeing somebody. They're like, oh, we wanted to go across Canada, so we're going to figure it out. So we ended up deciding to get like a camper.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jesus.
And there was like three seasons. So the first season was in 2008.
It's not like the Buried Life guys.
Oh, I
remember those guys?
Not really. I didn't really watch that. So, yeah.
Well, they're more like
they go to a bunch of different places around the world. So only one of the episodes was in Canada.
Right.
That's when they drove the camper from East Coast to West Coast.
Yeah.
And then
they only did it in like a few days too. So it's like, well, that's pretty quick.
Yeah. And so then they go to a bunch of different countries.
Man, talking about this now is getting me all excited to do this. Because I know, like, you know, we talk, you know, offline, I guess you can say about all the different things. And we have so many different ideas. One day it's like, oh, well, let's just build a house and let's get some land. Next day it's like, oh, well, let's just go move downtown Montreal or whatever. And then like, and we'll do the next day. It's like, oh, well, let's just open up whatever wellness fitness center or whatever. The next day it's like, well, let's just travel around whatever. It's like, next day let's just move to Thailand. It's like, Jesus.
Pick something.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But I just don't want it to end up being one of those things where it's like, you know, the Netflix thing, it's like you end up, oh, what are you going to watch? And you end up not watching anything because you're just scrolling through all the options. Everything. And it's like, don't want that to be us where it's like, we're just thinking of all the cool things that we want to do. And then we end up doing nothing because there's just too many options.
Yeah.
But thinking about this and talking about like an RV, and if we just have something reliable that we could just, do you know what I mean? That just works and that we can sleep in and the rest will take care of itself. Right. Mm-hmm. So we need an RV and I would say a sailboat and a canoe. Right.
Yeah.
We can do it.
Yeah.
I mean, if we look at how much we spent on that RV, if we can get something, it was relatively cheap.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's a reason.
You know, if we get, well, it didn't work, but if we could, you know what I mean? If we get something that's comparatively cheap and that runs, that's all we need. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I don't know.
But yeah,
it would be really cool. It would be something.
It'd be cool. Indeed. Yeah, Adam Shoalts, very inspirational.
Yeah, sorry, we're totally getting into the pie in the sky here. Yeah, Adam Shoalts, Alone Against the North, an expedition to the unknown. Yeah, read it. And I've read all of his books, so he's awesome, very knowledgeable. Yeah. Seems like a really cool guy. I totally want to chat with him. I want to go camping with him. Or like bring me on your adventure. That would be amazing. It would be awesome. I wonder though if I went like right now, it's like, oh yeah, well come on, we're going to do this 2-week thing. If I just pack up and fold like these other guys, but like, the bugs, it's too much. Or whatever. Oh no, you wouldn't. It's still, I know the bugs would just drive me bananas, but you just deal with it, I guess. Yeah. They're rough. Yeah. I don't know. Again, like the pleasure you get from pain, you know, in that way of like course. after you traverse through the struggle and you just like, you know. Yeah, I did it, and I think like that's how he felt when he was finished. And the like, view, I did it. And even and when you're on the water too, you're not getting you have relief from bugs, right? So yeah. No, It'd be amazing.
Yeah.
Be amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was great. Adam Shoalts. Definitely check him out. Read all his stuff because it is amazing.
Amazing. Yeah.
And with that, I'm just going to say thank you, as always, for watching and listening to our podcast. We really appreciate it.
Yes, especially when you ramble.
I always ramble. That's the thing. That's why the 20-minute podcast ends up being 80 minutes. But
that's all right.
'Tis what it is.
Indeed.
So if you do like the stuff that we do, please check us out on our website, odumandandrea.com. And maybe we'll figure out how we can get some sponsors and do our own things, and then we'll document that stuff. That'd be cool. That would be amazing. I could say it right now, is if somehow some magical thing, so it's like, yeah, here's $100,000 to do this crazy video or journey through across Canada and make some documentary or whatever. I'm like, yeah,
sold.
Down. When do we leave? Like right now.
Right now.
So that would be
cool.
be amazing.
It would be awesome.
So maybe we can look into that, see what we can find.
Shit, I shouldn't have read this book.
You shouldn't have, but you're excited too. Don't lie. So with that,
Chris high five.
Here's high five. That
was a bad one.
You were getting good,
there we
but
go.
All right.
Sorry.
That one.
I was off my game.
You're off your high five game. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep.
As
Have
always.
a great week.
Yep. We'll see you next time.
Bye.